Hey guys, welcome back to the painting of Baby Yoda. Sorry that it has took me a little while to get this video up, but let's just go ahead and jump into it. Today we're going to be covering the background, and I am going to be putting some glazes over Yoda's skin. So that's what you're going to see in this part of the video series. So I'm starting off with the background, and I am using a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt umber and just a tiny bit of white. I am using more of the ultramarine blue than I am the burnt umber, just because I want it to have more of a grayish tone. I don't know if I'm going to keep this color or not, but for now this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to fast forward through this part just because it's kind of tedious to watch, but I'm just doing one solid color over the entire background. And I will say that one reason why I like to go ahead and put the background on at this stage is because Yoda has all these little peach fuzzies at the top of his head. And I didn't do that with the underpainting because it would just been an extra step that, as you see, I would have completely went over. So I'm going ahead and I'm going to put that background on, and then probably in the next video, maybe even the video after that, I don't know how many videos this is actually going to take. But then I will put in those little hairs. And that's the reason why I like to put in this background first. Alright guys, so we're actually going to be starting with the eyes now. And I am starting off with the pupils. I find that that is the easiest area to start with first when you're working with the eyes. And his eyes, they're so big and so cute. You have to really pay attention to any type of reflections that are in the eyes. It's going to give a very realistic look, which is exactly what we want for this type of painting. So for the pupils, I am using a mix of ultramarine blue and the burnt umber. Yes, I use that a lot because you can achieve so many different types of hues with that. And it's almost a black, but it's, you know, it's not black. And later on, I will go in and use black. But for now, this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to be going back and forth between the reference photo and really looking to see, you know, where those darks are. Want to make sure that you get along the top of the eye and the bottom of the eye with this same color. It'll just give that roundness that his eyes have. So make sure that you're paying attention to that when you're painting him. Now for this part, I am actually using a flat brush. As you can see, I like to get that nice chiseled edge, but I'm still trying to use my bigger brushes at this stage. So I'm using a number 8 to get around the eye area. And then when I get later on in the painting, I will switch to smaller brushes. But for now, I am using that number 8. And with all my other paintings, I've talked about this before, but if you haven't seen that, I will mention it again. I do use the Liquid Original. I mix that in with my paint, or I'll actually glaze it over the area that I'm getting ready to paint and just do that little small area, especially if it's a bigger painting. And that way the Liquid Original doesn't dry on me so fast. If I just put it in a little area, like say the eyes, if I really want to focus on the eyes and I know that I'm not going to get to the rest of the body, I don't want to cover it with the Liquid Original. I just want to cover the eyes. So just depending on what I'm doing, I actually did glaze over just the eyes at this part of the painting. And that way I could also rest my hand on the painting, because I don't have a maul stick and I really wish that I would get one, but I just haven't got one yet. But it lets me have the freedom of resting my hand on the canvas so I can be a little bit more precise with my strokes. Now here I'm still using that mixture that I used for the background, but I added more white. And that's going to give me the reflections, or start to give me the reflections in the eye and the roundness. Really making sure to pay close attention. I'm not trying to get my brightest or my darkest colors right now at this point of the painting. I'm just focusing on getting more of the midtones than I am anything. Now I'm going in here and I'm just adding a little bit more white to the same color that I had already put down, just to give a little bit more variation in the painting. So I'm not doing anything drastic. It may look like I'm putting white in there, but I'm not. It's just that same mixture with just a tiny bit more white, just to lighten it up a tiny bit more. And I do like to do both eyes at the same time, because I'm going to be using the same colors. So if I don't want to do one eye and focus on that one and then have to start all over, so I'll do the pupils at the same time. I put, you know, the iris colors in there at the same time, and it really helps me to keep everything coherent. Now I am using the same dirty brush, but I just dipped it into straight titanium white to put in that highlight. It was starting to get to where I was afraid I was going to lose that highlight, so I just wanted to dab that in there so I could remember where it was at. Now I'm going through and I'm very gently starting to blend in that mid-tone with that light color. And I want to go in a sweeping, rounded motion. And when I do that, it's going to give more of a rounded appearance to the eyes. And where his eyes are so big, they really have that sphere look that, you know, you wouldn't normally really get if you were doing like a person or an animal. But his eyes are so big that, you know, you really want to capture that roundness. All right, now I've noticed that in the painting there is this really pretty, almost like a gold flecks look in his eyes. And so I got me some, what color was that? Yellow ochre, that's what it was. So I got some yellow ochre and I started putting it on the eyes. And as you can see, it doesn't look good. I wish I would have waited until the next stage. So if you're doing this, don't put the yellow ochre on there right now. You can put it in at the next stage. Lesson learned with that one. Now I'm going back through with, I did get a smaller brush this time. I switched to, I think it was a number 2, maybe a 4 flat, so I can start putting in the lower lid and just around the edges there. I was starting to lose the darks around there, which is very easy to do. That's why it's important to go back to your reference and constantly go back and forth so you don't lose things that you did. And when I blended out those lighter colors and then I put that yellow ochre on there, I lost it. So make sure that you're paying attention to that when you're painting your Yoda. And if you are painting along with me, and I hope that you are, I would love to see anything that you're doing. I would love to see your progress. I do have an Instagram and a Facebook. My Instagram and Facebook are both just at Overby Fine Art. Tag me in them. I would love to see what you're doing. So since I didn't like that yellow ochre, I'm just going back over that with the burnt umber ultramarine blue mixture. And as you can see, it's starting to get kind of a grayed, muddy mess. Be very careful with that. That's one reason why I do eventually have to stop, because it's just mixing so much and I'm not getting anywhere. So be very careful when you are, if you get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere, everything's just mixing and starting to become one solid color, just stop and let it dry. And that's what I eventually have to do, just because it just wasn't working out today. But I am still blending out in that, circular motion, that sweeping motion, almost kind of like a U, to make sure that I get that roundness in the eye. And you can see in that left eye there, it almost looks like he's looking up at the sky and you've got some clouds in there and everything. But that's actually not what he's looking at, so I'll have to fix that later on too. Now I'm trying again with this yellow ochre, trying to give it another shot, and it doesn't work out. So like I said before, don't put it in at this stage. Wait until we put in these lights and these darks and the iris and the pupil, and then put it in at the next stage. Now I'm moving over to the other eye and I'm blending out that same yellow ochre. Like I said, it just wasn't looking good. So I'm gonna try to put it back in, but to be honest, it just doesn't look great. So I'm going in now and putting in the darks up at the top because I hadn't put any color in there yet. Whenever you look at eyes, there's always going to be a shadow that's overcasting from where, you know, your eyebrows are coming out farther than your eyeballs are. So you're always going to have a darker shadow there at the top. So just keep that in mind whenever you're, you know, doing any type of eyes, that you're always going to have that darker, more recessed look at the top part of the eyes. And here I'm just trying to get those dark spots, because when I blended out that yellow ochre, I lost a lot of the darks there at the bottom. Now I am using the Winsor and Winton oil colors. That's something that I've used from the very beginning when I started oil painting. I love them. You know, they're not extremely expensive when it comes to oil paints. They're not the cheapest, but they're kind of, you know, that nice middle ground. So I definitely suggest that brand. And for, you know, my brushes, I actually just use the Artist Loft brand from Michaels. And you know, they're okay. They're good if you're just starting out. I like them because I can get a very nice chiseled edge. I am looking for more brushes, so if anybody has any recommendations. The one thing that I find with the Artist Loft brand brushes is that they, like, the whole entire brush, the top part, will pop off. And I just push it back on there, but that is my biggest mistake. I actually like the brush itself. I like the way it feels. I like the actual bristles on the brush. They're very soft. They clean up really well. They hold their shape. But the top, where it connects, where the metal little clamp thing connects to the actual brush, pops off on me all the time. And I don't know if I just got a bad batch of brushes or what it is, but besides that, you know, they're not too bad, especially if you're just starting off. I also like the Montmartre, just to throw that out there. I did use that for the background. I really actually like these brushes, but when you first get them, they do have a very, very strong chemical smell. So I would suggest taking them, open them up, and putting them outside or in your garage or just somewhere out of the way so they can air out, because they will take about a week to get rid of that chemical smell. But the brushes themselves are very nice. All right, now with the eyes, I'm just trying to reestablish some of those highlights. They did, you know, when I was blending out the eye, they got lost. So I'm just trying to put those highlights of whatever it is that Wise Yoda is looking at. I noticed here that I actually lost those darks, which, you know, is the part of the pupil there, and I did lose that. So I'm trying to put that back in, but because I have put so much of the other colors here, it's just not wanting to get as dark as what I want to. This is kind of to the point to where I was saying, I might need to stop, because I'm starting to just get a big muddy mess. So I wanted to get, you know, as dark as I could in those areas, and then I will move on to another part of Yoda. But you can see here, I'm using that same color that I originally used in the pupil of the eye, and you can see it's still very nice and dark, but where I've put so many different colors, and especially when I started putting in that white and it's so opaque, then I'm just getting more of a darker gray instead of that nice dark, almost black that I want to achieve. Which I can do that later. After this dries, I will put in the darker and it will show up perfectly. But this is why it's important to know when to actually stop. So now I'm going to be putting in the whites of the eyes. And this is just that same color that's almost like the reflections, just a little bit lighter. And that tear duct area there too. And I noticed that I had actually lost it over on that eye, so I put a little mark there to remember where it was. And also there at the tear duct. Attempting to put one more time that yellow ochre. I just hadn't learned my lesson just yet. So I am trying to put that in again. And like I said before, you know, just wait. Save yourself the headache and just wait. Now in his tear duct area, he does have this really nice highlight, so I want to make sure that I capture that too, but it is more of a goldeny color. So I did put down some of that yellow ochre there, and then I'm putting in a little bit more of the highlight there, but it is not completely white though. I won't be able to achieve that until the final stages because I am using dirty brushes, so it already has a little bit of color on there. So it's, you know, it's bright compared to the other parts, but it is not completely white. so let's go ahead and start putting some skin color here on Yoda. Now Yoda, he is green, so I didn't know which one I should use. You guys let me know what you think. I ended up going with Viridian Hue for this. And I am doing glazes, and as you can see, the underpainting is showing through because I wanted to keep that texture that I had used with the underpainting. I was trying to decide between the Viridian Hue and the Sap Green. I decided to go with the Viridian because I knew that the ultramarine blue would, not the ultramarine blue, but the burnt umber that I used for the underpainting would help to dye it down a little bit. And it is more of a transparent color. So when I mixed it in with the Liquid Original to get my glaze, you want to, with glazes, you want to try to use your transparent colors. I don't know if Sap Green is a transparent color. Let me look and see. Yeah, it actually is a transparent color. So, you could try that one too. If you do, let me know in the comments how it turned out for you. But I am putting this glaze over the entire part of Yoda's skin. Now, as you see here, that Viridian is extremely bright in this area. I think it's one because the canvas is a little bit lighter, because when I was doing the underpainting, I didn't use as much of the burnt umber, and you can see a big difference between how it dyes it down when there's more burnt umber. But I also didn't have enough Liquid Original in there, and it's more of the true color. It's still a glaze, but it's not as much of a glaze. And I wanted to show you guys the difference here. And I do go back in and I blend it out, and I put a little bit more Liquid Original on there to kind of help even that back out. But that's why it's important to make sure that you're using a glaze and not just the color straight up from the tube. Because if you do, it's going to be way too dark. It almost has like a candy look to it. It's so bright and so vibrant, which is great for certain things, but not if you're trying to accomplish something that's realistic. I don't have anything on this brush right now at this point except for the Liquid Original, just because I'm trying to even that back out. And it does, it evens back out. I blend it back out eventually. But you can see there's a huge difference there. So make sure, like when you're doing a glaze, the Liquid Original, when you put that paint color into that Liquid Original, it's still almost completely clear. So just keep that in mind. It shouldn't have this nice color to it because it is a glaze. And as you can see, I can still see all those wrinkles and all that detail that I did in the underpainting because I am doing a glaze. If I was to put straight up paint on there without doing this glazing process, then I would lose a lot of that detail and a lot of that hard work that I put in the beginning, which would make it completely useless. But I am going to fast forward through this part just because I'm just covering, like I said, all of Yoda in this Viridian Hue color. So Yoda is holding something here in his hand. I don't know, it looks like some type of ball or, you know, something like that. You know, I got Christmas on the brain, so to me it kind of looks like a Christmas ornament. But I want to make sure that I get that blocked in too. So I am switching my brushes here, and I am using I believe it's an 8 flat or 10 flat. And I'm using the same color as the background, as you can see when you see it right up to the background there. I did have to put a little bit of the liquid original in there because I didn't glaze at the beginning. And now I'm just taking white on that same dirty brush just to kind of put in a little bit of those highlights there. And it, you know, like I said, at this stage, it's not going to be your brightest or your darkest. You're just trying to kind of, you know, block in those basic colors. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and move on to the wrinkles of Yoda. I'm still doing a glaze here, but I'm using that same color that I used inside of the eye to get these wrinkles. I'm using the ultramarine blue mixed with the burnt umber. There's no white in this though, and I'm going to just go over those same marks and blend them out to get that wrinkled look. So I'm going to do this all over the face, in the areas where I can see the wrinkles from the underpainting. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this part too, so these videos aren't as long as what, you know, the previous ones have been. I know it's kind of hard to sit here and listen to me just jabber, so I'm going to fast forward through this part, but that is all that I'm doing. All right, now I'm going to start trying to shade in also some of the darker areas that aren't just the wrinkles. They're actually, you know, kind of a shaded area in his face because the sun is hitting him. So I'm going to be using ultramarine blue for this, but it is still a glaze. It's very important that you don't just dip it straight in there and put it on there, because if you do, it's going to look awful. I do use the ultramarine blue, and I'm starting to try to get some shape to give him more of a three-dimensional look. Now I've moved on to a purple. Now you could either mix your own purple, maybe using some alizarin with some ultramarine blue if you want to, but I actually had the color of dioxine purple, and it is a Winsor & Newton color like I said before. And I use that, and as you can see, it gives a very nice purple. When you're using it as a glaze, it's very realistic because I've already put that green down, so it's mixing with the green underneath, and also from the ultramarine blue from the understage before, from the underpainting. Because Yoda does have a lot of purples and pinks and blues around his eye. So make sure that you're paying attention to that whenever you are picking out your colors. You don't want them to be very bright. You want them to be more of a toned down, maybe earth tony type of color, so they'll look realistic for you. But he does have purples, blues, and, you know, reds there in his cheeks, well, I'll be getting to in a minute. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that in the reference photo. And I'm not worrying about, he does have some wrinkles above his eye, like where his eyelid would be. I'm not worrying about those at this stage because they're just probably going to get blended out anyway. So when this part dries, I will put those in the next video. So I'm going in here with a little bit more of the purple because I just felt like it wasn't quite dark enough. And I'm just going to put a nice layer over that again. And then I'm going to blend it out with the color above. And he does have a little bit of there on his nose. And underneath his eye. Now I'm going to start putting in some shading underneath his chin area using the ultramarine blue. It is still a glaze, but it's going to be a little bit more of the color mixed in there. As you can see, it's darker than what was around the eyes. And I'm trying to really just establish that shadowed area in his face. So it's going to be, you know, pretty much his mouth and below. Now I'm going to be moving on to the cheek area. Here is the glaze of the alizarin crimson, but this is still on that dirty brush that I just used for doing the shadows. So it's a mix of the alizarin and the ultramarine blue, which is kind of giving like this purpley pink color, which it looks very realistic when you look at it compared to the photo, the reference photo. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm just going to be applying that to the cheek area. Be very mindful of that big bright highlight where the sun is hitting him on the left side of his face, because that cheek area with the red, it will, fade out because it's so bright over there. So don't take it over into there in that area. So now I'm going to move on to the eyelid area, and I am using the ultramarine blue, or not the ultramarine blue, the alizarin crimson, and it's mixing in with that purple and that green that's already been laid down, and it's giving me this very nice natural skin color look that he has there on his eyes. And I'm going to put that on the lids, on the top and the bottom. One thing to make your eyes look realistic is you do have that waterline underneath the actual eyeball. Make sure that you put that in. It's very important if you want it to look realistic. So be aware of that when you are doing your painting, no matter whether it's an animal or it's a person, everybody has that waterline. Okay, so at this stage of the painting, I've noticed that I forgot the wrinkles there above his lip, and you know, it's a very distinct feature on his face. So I'm just going to use the same colors that I've been using to put in for the wrinkles on the other part of his face, and I'm just going to freehand it and just put them in there. It's still a glaze, it's going to be very light, but you will notice them as you go on with the painting. So if you ever forget something like that, just add it in later. It's fine. So I'm going to be moving on to the inside of the ear now. I'm going to be using a mixture of the alizarin crimson with just a tiny bit of purple to kind of dye it down. It's going to mix with that green that I put as the first glaze like everything else has. So I'm going to put that on the entirety of the ear, on both ears. And then if I need to, I'll add a little bit of purple, or you know, you could also use that dark mixture of the ultramarine blue mixed in with the burnt umber to give you those darks in this inside the ear. And you can see here that this left ear, well, I guess it's his right ear, I didn't have enough of the medium in there of the liquid original, and you can see the difference between the two there. So I'm gonna have to go in with a Q-tip, very easy to do, and you just pull a little bit of that out to kind of tame it back down. Now at the bottom part of his ear, he does have this really yellowish tone. So here I'm using the yellow ochre, and I will just blend that out in with a little bit of the green and going up into the alizarin crimson for the inside of the ear. So make sure that you pay attention to those hues also. All right, now I'm going to start trying to add in some highlights. I'm taking the Viridian and putting in some white. And also, of course, I have that medium on there. This time it's not as much medium because I've already covered the entire thing with medium. I don't want to keep adding more and more medium on there. And I'm just looking for any places to where the sun may be hitting, which you know is usually going to be around the ears, on the side of his face, and the top of his head. All right, so I've got the highlights where I want them on the ears and the top of the head. And I'm taking now a mixture of gray by using that same color that I used in the background and adding a little bit more white. And I'm going to add in some highlights that are on the face. I don't want them to be as bright as the highlights where the sun is hitting Yoda in his face. So I did decide to use a gray color to do this, and I think that it turned out great. All right, so let's move on down to the hand area. Don't forget the hands. They have their highlights just like anything else. So on this side of his body, it's not going to be as bright as what it will be on the other side where the sun is hitting. So I am using that gray color that I used on the face. And then on the other hand, I will use that mixture of the meridian and white to get a little bit more of a brighter highlight. All right, guys, and then after that, I'm going to be done with this video. I will be posting up another one really soon. Hopefully it will be next week. And then we will be continuing on with his face, putting in some more of that extra details in the eyes that we lost during this stage. But don't worry, because we can put those in at the next stage. And I also will be starting to glaze over colors on his coat that he has on. So I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.